In today's video, I'm going to be giving you my 5 tips on buying pre-loved luxury, which I realise is going to be a topic that some people might find strange, because if you've been watching a little while, you'll know that when I've previously talked about buying pre-loved, I'm not really a big fan. And hear me out first before you come for me and say, Mel, you're a hypocrite or something, because I still really stand by that ethos, to be honest. I don't buy pre-loved for a set of reasons that you can, shameless self-promo, watch in a separate video here on my channel. Fast forward a few months or even years, we are in a very different situation in today's world. We are in a cost of living crisis for many. We are in a situation where brands like the Chanel, the Hermeses, and even the lower tier luxury brands that we all thought were a bit more approachable are raising their prices. From that perspective, I look at that video and I think, you know, my points still stand. I personally still stand by them, and unless it's like a really vintage item or really hard to get. One of my reasons for that is because of, I guess, authenticity and the luxury experience and all that kind of business. But I realise not everybody has the luxury in today's climate of holding those beliefs. It's not so easy as to be able to walk into the actual boutique to be able to get that item, especially when the prices are so inflated, especially when cost of living crisis is happening. And also, especially nowadays, I'm also seeing that brands are increasingly making their items harder to access. Everyone's trying to do the Hermes game, essentially, is what I'm saying. And I would say for those of you out there where you are in that position that I've just mentioned before on those reasons, then I do think buying pre-loved is a good alternative. However, there are so many concerns that I've mentioned in my previous video on pre-loved, and in other ones I'm sure before as well, that are more, I guess, to do with the authenticity and the safety, security of the item that you are buying. I wanted to share some tips. At least if I was to consider buying pre-loved, then I would follow these 5 tips that I'm about to share with you. So the first tip that I have, tip number 1, is be realistic on what you're getting. Really go in and do as much research as you can on what they're offering and why they've put a certain price up. There's a saying, if it's too good to be true, it usually is. And even though pre-loved, like I mentioned, you know, you could probably get a bargain for an item, you know, if it doesn't have a full set, or you know, if someone really wants to get rid of an item fast, you might get it for a good price. But really assess the descriptions of the item that you're going for, especially if it's online on a Vestiaire or an eBay, something like that, especially where you can't see the item in person and you're just going off photos that someone at home, not even a business, someone's done it on their smartphone. You have a wealth of information on pricing, on authenticity at your fingertips. So many videos online, so many listings online as well that you can compare. Let's say you're buying a Chanel classic flap in, I guess, the medium size. They're probably at this stage, depending on the condition, obviously, probably about, I'm assuming about £6,000, say, just for the sake of argument. If you suddenly see online a listing for a classic flap that is £2,000 and they claim to have the full set and all that, common sense alarm bells should be ringing there. So just make sure that you do all of your due diligence and really take the listing for its entirety, not just being enticed by the price, because often that can be a really big red flag that people overlook because of just the sheer excitement that you're finding a good bargain. Tip number 2 then is, if you can buy an item with a full set of authenticity cards, original packaging, consider those ones first. Obviously for vintage items, a little bit different there, but there is always some sort of layer of authenticity and trust that you can go through, such as an authenticator online. So I believe some people use Entropy. I believe even if you have a close essay at, let's say, the Chanel Hermeses that you can rely on. I know it's a bit cheeky, but you can always try. And ideally ones that you can cross-reference with, you know, items that you maybe have gotten before with authenticity cards, ones that your friends have, or ones that have been posted online by the numerous luxury bloggers out there on YouTube and Instagram. Just make sure that you get the item authenticator, or at least have good faith that the item has its full set of authenticity, because the last thing you want to do is buy a super fake. There are so many out there now. They are all so good. Even sometimes I feel like authenticators have a difficult task of actually identifying fakes compared to real ones. Tip number 3 then is a kind of a follow-on from the last tip, and that's, where possible, if you can buy from a brick and mortar store which I know is uncommon for people these days because they're always online and you get your Prime deliveries next day and you just get everything basically instantaneously as you buy it. I actually think it's very underestimated, the power of a brick and mortar store, the fact that there is a permanent fixture that, you know, can't just up and leave tomorrow morning if there's an issue, that if you buy an item you realise it's not authentic, or even if you, before then, you know, you go and inspect the item and you're not happy with it and you have question marks, you can always just leave it there, walk away without having spent anything but your time. Some of these items, they are upwards of the 10,000 if you're thinking of Hermes, and if you're not confident in the quality and the authenticity and you can't go ahead and see it, you know, I'd be very hesitant to spend that amount of money virtually. I think it's always better as well when you have that kind of gut instinct in person, you can always detect that, whereas over online, people can write the right things, show the right images, and you may not even know until you receive the item if that's actually what you're going to get. But I would also say the protections that come with brick and mortar stores, and just for example, the luxury promises of the world, the Celliers, those are the ones I think based in London. Going at least to a brick and mortar store will at least alleviate a lot of concerns that you have around authenticity and also security around whether your item is genuine or not. And also, you know, you don't want items going in the post, so I feel like if you're there in person to inspect it, that's something that's going to make you feel a lot better about dropping a significant amount of money on Preloved, especially when you consider it to the individual seller on eBay who have no idea where they're from, no idea on the credibility, everything could have been made up, and ultimately you may never even see them again if there's an issue. You know, you always hear about these nightmare stories, and it just isn't worth it to get a saving potentially on an item you want just because it's a little bit cheaper. Now on to tip number 4, and this is around payment methods. If possible, and this is by no means financial advice, obviously take this with a pinch of salt, do your own research, but if possible, pay with a credit card or through, I guess, like a payment intermediary. I know there's more than just PayPal, to be honest, but if you can pay with a credit card, like an American Express, MasterCards, you know, there's 2 big ones there, that would be even better because you can actually then open up a case against the seller in case you don't receive the item, in case it's not authentic, to then get your money back, especially because you're borrowing that credit card company's money instead of your own. They will also be more enticed and incentivized to fight for you than if it was your own direct debit money, to get that extra buyer protection. There's a lot of, I guess, consumer regulation around it as well. So if you can get that next layer of protection, because even when they're investigating your case, and even if it's not successful, at least for the time that they're investigating, they will hold that money aside and won't charge you for it in your statement. So that's just one I would highly recommend. I believe you can also do the same with the PayPals of the world as well. But I would recommend credit cards over it because I think with PayPal, they're actually in personal experience not very good in terms of customer service, especially if you also go through eBay, and these things can often be very drawn out. But with my American Express, in the past where I've had incidents, not with luxury, but other ones where I haven't received something or it's not as described, they've always been very, very quick and very diligent in their investigations. And then the final tip, number 5, if I can call it a tip, is just be mentally prepared for the risk-reward trade-off. You always hear the saying, don't you? High risk, high reward. You know, if you want to get something on the cheap, I'm sure there are deals like that in the luxury community. And we all hope that we can all be a recipient of a great deal, don't we? But you just got to get mentally prepared and be in that headspace for if it goes wrong, that you are going to be equipped mentally and financially to be able to deal with it and accept the potential consequences, not in like a dire way, but if something's too good to be true, it usually is. With all that being said, those are my tips for buying pre-loved. I'm sure there's many more out there that you guys might have. If so, please leave them down below. I think a lot of people in the community will find it useful. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one.